The scent of turpentine and aged canvas clung to the air in Silas Blackwood's studio, a thick, almost palpable perfume that spoke of countless hours spent in meticulous replication. At 38, Silas was a ghost in his own life, a man whose prodigious talent for mimicking the old masters had led him not to fame, but to the shadows of the art world. His studio, tucked away in a forgotten industrial corner of the city, was a testament to his reclusive existence. Surgical tools laid out with obsessive precision, an array of pigments organized by hue and historical period, and on a dozen easels, the hauntingly perfect ghosts of masterpieces he had stolen, then flawlessly recreated for a clandestine syndicate. He ate alone. Simple, often reheated meals. The silence of his vast, high-ceilinged space broken only by the whisper of his brush against canvas or the low hum of the dehumidifier. There was a profound artistic emptiness in Silas, a weariness that settled deep in his bones. He could breathe life into a Rembrandt, capture the ethereal glow of a Vermeer, or replicate the fierce strokes of a Caravaggio with a fidelity that fooled the most seasoned experts. Yet, each perfect copy was a hollow echo, a reminder of the artistic voice he had lost, the genuine creation he no longer pursued. His genius had become his gilded cage, constantly creating perfection that was not his own. This subtle ache, a longing for something more authentic, something true, made him surprisingly sympathetic despite his illicit profession. He was a master of imitation, but a stranger to himself. One blustery Tuesday morning, a terse, encrypted message from his shadowy syndicate boss, Madame Isolde, pinged on his secure tablet. It was an urgent commission, demanding a specific forgery by the following day. Silas sighed, the familiar knot of dread tightening in his stomach. He needed a rare, obscure pigment, one that could only be found at a particular, out-of-the-way art supply store across town. He pulled on a worn jacket and headed out, the biting wind a stark contrast to the stale warmth of his studio. He moved through the city with a detached elegance, his eyes, accustomed to discerning the minutiae of brushstrokes, taking in the world in almost painfully sharp detail. He passed through a public park, where a small, impromptu art fair was underway. Most of the pieces were amateurish, brightly colored landscapes and stiff portraits. Silas scoffed internally, his cultivated taste instantly dismissing them. Then, he stopped. Near a rickety easel, a young woman, perhaps barely 20, sat hunched, her shoulders trembling. Before her stood an elderly man in a poorly fitting suit, a self-proclaimed art critic by the garish badge pinned to his lapel, loudly pontificating to a small, indifferent crowd. He held up a canvas the young artist had painted, a vibrant, almost ethereal cityscape, rendered in an unusual, almost dreamlike style. "This," the critic boomed, his voice dripping with condescension, "is a travesty, a child's scrawl. No understanding of perspective, no command of color. This isn't art, it's an insult to the masters." He made to toss the canvas into a nearby bin. The young artist let out a small, wounded cry. Her face, tear-streaked and vulnerable, crumpled in despair. Silas felt a jolt, a memory of his own early days, the raw, unfiltered passion he once possessed. He remembered the sting of dismissive words, the crushing weight of artistic judgment before he learned to hide behind the perfection of others. Without thinking, Silas stepped forward, his voice cutting through the critic's bluster, sharp and clear. "You misunderstand its purpose, sir." The critic, startled, turned. Silas picked up the painting, holding it gently. "The perspective isn't flawed, it's intentional. It's a subjective truth, a reflection of how the artist feels the city, not merely how they see it. Look at the play of light on the rain-slicked pavement, the way it captures the fleeting, transient beauty of a moment. This isn't a technical exercise, it's an emotional landscape." His voice, usually reserved, held an unexpected passion, a quiet, almost reverent defense of genuine, heartfelt creation. The critic sputtered, thrown off balance. The small crowd, initially indifferent, now looked at the painting with new eyes. Silas turned to the young artist, his gaze softening. Don't let ignorance extinguish your fire. This has soul. And soul, young lady, is something no critic can truly judge. He pulled out his wallet, extracting a crisp $50 bill, more than the asking price. I'll take it. He folded the painting carefully, dismissing his act as charity to himself, a convenient excuse to justify an impulse he couldn't quite explain. But in that small act, his hidden layer of empathy, his underlying respect for true art, flickered to life, making the audience root for the conflicted forger. Back in his studio, as he meticulously mixed pigments for Madame Isolde's latest demand, Silas's thoughts drifted. He possessed an almost encyclopedic knowledge of art history, a keen eye for every brushstroke, every subtle nuance that defined a master's hand. But there was one anomaly, one persistent, maddening failure that haunted his otherwise perfect record, The Veiled Muse, by the elusive 17th-century Dutch master, Hendrik van der Velde. Legend claimed van der Velde had infused his paintings with a living light, an ethereal quality that seemed to shift and breathe, making them impossible to truly replicate. The Veiled Muse, a portrait of a woman whose eyes seemed to follow you, shrouded in a gossamer veil that defied all attempts at duplication, was the pinnacle of this myth. Silas had attempted to forge the Veiled Muse multiple times throughout his career, always at the syndicate's insistence, and each attempt had been a humiliating, maddening failure. He could get the colors right, the composition perfect, the aging process flawless. But that light, that indefinable soul that emanated from the original, always eluded him. Every copy, despite his technical prowess, was just that, a copy, flat and lifeless compared to the almost spiritual luminescence of van der Velde's original. This failure was his deepest professional secret, a flaw in his otherwise perfect record. It was a phantom limb, a constant, nagging reminder of the one thing his genius could not conquer. He would spend hours poring over what few high-resolution images existed, searching for the key, the hidden trick, the secret of van der Velde's genius, only to be met with frustrating silence. This enduring mystery, this uncopyable masterpiece, created a quiet curiosity, setting the stage for its eventual, startling appearance. The insistent, piercing ring of Silas's secure tablet shattered the pre-dawn quiet of his studio. He squinted at the glowing screen, the caller ID flashing Isolde. A cold dread coiled in his stomach, a familiar premonition of impending trouble. Madame Isolde was not a woman who called without purpose, and her purposes were rarely benign. She was the unseen hand that moved the chess pieces on the global art market's darkest board, a ruthless and sophisticated woman whose ambition knew no bounds. Her voice, when it came through the encrypted line, was as smooth and unyielding as polished steel. "Silas," she began, her tone devoid of warmth, "we have a situation. The van der Velde, the one we've been tracking for months." Silas felt a familiar tension tighten in his jaw. He knew which van der Velde she meant. The whispers in the illicit art world had grown louder recently, hinting at the imminent reemergence of a piece believed lost for centuries. "What about it?" he asked, his voice flat. "Complications," Isolde purred, a dangerous undertone. "The original cannot be authenticated through conventional means. Its current location is compromised, too heavily guarded, or perhaps the ownership is ambiguous. The buyer, a certain Middle Eastern dignitary, is growing impatient. He demands proof of authenticity, or the entire deal collapses. And with it, a 9-figure transaction." Silas's breath hitched. 9 figures. This wasn't just a deal. It was a behemoth, a transaction that could reshape the entire syndicate's fortunes. "So, you need me to authenticate the original," he ventured, already knowing the answer. "No, Silas," Isolde's voice sharpened, cutting through the line like a razor. "I need you to produce a perfect forgery of the Veiled Muse." The words hit Silas like a physical blow. echoing the uncopyable masterpiece that haunted his every waking moment. His hand trembled, nearly dropping the tablet. "Madame, you know that's impossible. I've told you. That painting, it has a quality, a light, that defies replication. I've tried. Repeatedly." He could feel the cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. This was his deepest professional failure, now thrown back in his face with devastating force. "Impossible is a word for the less talented." "Silas," Isolde retorted, her voice hardening. "You are the best. You will produce it. You have precisely 72 hours. My private jet departs for Dubai at 0900 on Friday. That painting, a flawless copy, must be on it. Failure will have severe personal consequences for you, not just professional ruin. Silas, think of your quiet little studio. Think of your freedom." The veiled threat hung heavy in the air, chilling him to the bone. This was the inciting incident, pushing Silas into an impossible situation, directly challenging his greatest, most humiliating failure, and threatening his very existence. The line went dead, leaving Silas in the oppressive silence of his studio, the pressure of the ultimatum crushing down on him. 72 hours to achieve the impossible. He paced his studio like a caged animal, his mind racing, trying to find a way out, a loophole, anything. He knew he needed a specific type of canvas, an obscure blend of linen and cotton aged precisely to the 17th century, something not easily acquired. He thought of the sprawling, chaotic expanse of the city's largest flea market, a place known for its hidden gems and eccentric vendors, a place where forgotten treasures often lay buried beneath layers of junk. It was a long shot, but he was desperate. The flea market was a sensory assault after the sterile quiet of his studio. The air hummed with 1,000 conversations. The scent of fried food mingled with dust and mothballs. Stall after stall stretched out, a bewildering array of antique furniture, vintage clothing, and bizarre curios. He pushed through the throng, his eyes scanning, searching for the impossible canvas. And then he saw her, Agnes Finch. She sat behind a small, cluttered stall, her frail frame barely visible behind a cascade of antique lace and faded trinkets. She was an old woman, her face a roadmap of fine wrinkles, her silver hair pulled back in a loose bun. But her eyes, a startling shade of clear blue, held a surprising depth of wisdom, an air of quiet resilience that belied her unassuming appearance. She embodied a simplicity, a genuine passion for the ordinary that was the antithesis of the rarefied, often cynical art world Silas inhabited. Silas, his gaze sweeping over her stall, almost missed it. Propped up at the very back, half hidden by a tarnished silver mirror, was a small, unassuming painting. It was a landscape, seemingly amateurish, with crude, almost childlike brushstrokes depicting a rolling green hill under a strangely vibrant sky. The perspective was off, the colors jarringly bright in places. He felt a familiar surge of professional disdain. This was folk art at its most unrefined, something a hobbyist might paint as a first attempt. A superior smirk played on his lips. He approached the stall, his voice tinged with thinly veiled condescension. "And what do we have here?" he asked, picking up the small canvas, his fingers almost recoiling from the rough texture. A child's first attempt at a landscape, perhaps, or a particularly enthusiastic amateur. He held it up, a mocking glint in his eyes, completely dismissing its artistic merit, seeing only its technical flaws. Agnes, however, met his gaze with an unwavering calm. "That young man," she said, her voice soft but firm, "was painted by a dear friend of mine. She saw the world differently, that one, and she painted it as her heart told her, not as the rules dictated. Her quiet dignity was a surprising rebuke, a stark contrast to Silas's casual arrogance. This was the clash of art worlds, the jarring collision of Silas's cold, calculated perfection and Agnes's warm, unpretentious truth. Silas scoffed again, about to dismiss her completely. But as he looked closer at the seemingly crude painting, something inexplicable caught his hyper-trained eye. A fleeting quality in its light, a subtle nuance in the vibrant sky, a shimmer of gold that shouldn't be there. Given the crude brushstrokes, it was almost imperceptible. A trick of the light, he told himself. But it pricked at his subconscious. A familiar itch of something other. Agnes, as if sensing his inner turmoil, leaned forward slightly. Some art. It doesn't shout. It whispers. Her words, simple yet profound, seemed to resonate deep within him, touching a nerve he hadn't known was still alive. She looked at him with those clear, surprisingly deep blue eyes. You have a true eye for beauty, young man. Don't let your cleverness blind you to it. She gestured to the painting. It's special, and for you, because you seem to see something. I'll let you have it for $10. $10. It was a ridiculously low price, almost as if she knew he needed it, knew it held a value beyond mere currency. He hesitated, his logical mind screaming that it was a useless piece of amateur junk. But that strange glint, that subtle whisper of light, refused to be dismissed. He pulled out a crumpled bill, more out of a vague, unsettling curiosity than genuine interest. Fine, he muttered, handing her the money. He still believed it was just another piece of folk art, a potential canvas for his impossible task. This purchase was a pivotal moment, unknowingly bringing him closer to a truth that would shatter his world. Back in the sterile, fluorescent-lit confines of his studio, the crude landscape painting looked even more out of place. He set it on his largest easel, intending to prepare the old canvas for his impossible forgery. He meticulously laid out his solvents, his brushes, his fine-grade sandpaper. He began the process of cleaning the surface, intending to simply paint over Agnes's amateur piece. He applied a gentle solvent, designed to remove old varnish and surface grime, preparing the canvas for a fresh layer of gesso. As he worked, a faint, almost imperceptible layer began to emerge beneath the crude top coat. He scoffed, thinking it was just another old landscape, a forgotten painting someone had discarded before Agnes's friend had painted over it. But, as he cleaned further, his movements precise, almost surgical. The outline of a familiar, luminous face began to emerge. Then, a shoulder, draped in what looked like gossamer fabric, the distinctive light, the inimitable technique, the ethereal quality that seemed to glow from within. It was undeniable. It was the face from The Veiled Muse, the legendary, uncopyable masterpiece by Hendrik van der Velde. The original. A profound, bone-jarring shock gripped Silas. His hands froze, the cloth still clutched in his fingers. He stumbled back, staring at the canvas, his mind reeling. He now held the very original, the painting he had failed to copy countless times, the very piece Madame Isolde was trying to acquire through an elaborate, multi-million-dollar fraud. He couldn't simply paint over it. His world, built on careful deception and flawless imitation, was irrevocably shattered. His life, the syndicate's entire operation, the fate of a priceless masterpiece, all hinged on his next move. The weight of this impossible discovery, of this profound irony, crashed down on him, leaving him breathless in the sudden, deafening silence of his studio. He had bought a masterpiece for $10, and it had just sealed his fate. The revelation of The Veiled Muse beneath Agnes Finch's unassuming landscape painting hit Silas Blackwood with the force of a physical blow. The masterpiece, shimmering with its legendary living light, was undeniable. It was the very original, the painting he had failed to replicate countless times. The very piece Madame Isolde was actively trying to acquire through her elaborate, multi-million-dollar fraud. His studio, once a sanctuary of meticulous deception, now felt like a cage, the walls closing in. He held the key to Isolde's entire operation, and in doing so, had placed a target squarely on his own back. He had two choices reveal the discovery to Madame Isolde, and likely incriminate himself, or try to secretly restore it, gambling his life on his ability to hide its true origin. His instincts, sharpened by years of navigating the illicit art world, screamed that revealing it was a death sentence. He had to restore it. And then? He didn't know. The thought was terrifying, exhilarating. This was his chance, not just to survive, but to demonstrate his genius for restoration, a skill even rarer, perhaps, than his forgery. He meticulously laid out his finest tools, his hands, usually so steady in replication, trembling slightly with a mixture of fear and profound reverence. He began the delicate, painstaking process of removing the amateur overpainting. Each stroke of his specialized solvents, each gentle pass of his microscalpel, was an act of profound unveiling. He worked with an uncanny understanding of Hendrik van der Velde's original technique, almost as if he could feel the master's hand beneath his own. The living light that had eluded him in countless forgeries now began to slowly emerge, pulsating from within the canvas as he peeled back the layers of crude paint and aged varnish. This was his unveiling, not a forgery, but a profound act of genuine artistic mastery, revealing the lost masterpiece. He was no longer just a forger. He was a restorer, a protector. Meanwhile, in her luxurious, minimalist penthouse overlooking the city, Madame Isolde felt a prickle of unease. Her network of informants, omnipresent and chillingly efficient, had reported an unusual flurry of activity at a seemingly nondescript private gallery, one that often served as a legitimate front for her syndicate's more ambiguous dealings. The gallery had recently acquired a crude, amateur landscape painting that had mysteriously appeared and was immediately locked away, supposedly for restoration, with Silas Blackwood himself assigned to the task. This struck Isolde as odd. Silas was a forger, not a restorer of amateur pieces. Her motive was pure, unadulterated greed and an insatiable desire for control over the global art market. She was the antagonist type A, the ruthless mastermind, a predator in a world of art and illicit wealth. Keep a close eye on Blackwood, she commanded her unseen network, her voice barely a whisper into her encrypted phone, and on Anya Sharma. She's too curious. Isolde, with her sharp intellect, had noted Sharma's reputation. Anya Sharma, a brilliant ethical art historian and restorer, worked for that very gallery. In her late 20s, with keen, intelligent eyes that missed nothing, Anya had once admired Silas Blackwood's genuine talent, long before whispers of his forgeries tainted his name. Now, she felt a growing disillusionment with the corruption that permeated the high-end art world, constantly struggling with her complicity in working for a gallery that subtly benefited from Madame Isolde's illicit dealings. She was the helper, initially wary of Silas, but her innate moral compass and profound passion for genuine art would eventually lead her to help him. Anya had been immediately suspicious of the gallery's latest acquisition, a seemingly worthless landscape. Yet it had been treated with the reverence usually reserved for a rare Van Gogh. Immediately spirited away to the private restoration studio where Silas Blackwood, of all people, was now working. Something felt deeply wrong. Using her access as a senior restorer, Anya fabricated an excuse, a routine inventory check, to gain entry to the studio. The heavy, soundproof door clicked shut behind her, isolating her from the gallery's polished facade. Silas was hunched over the easel, his back to her, absorbed in his work. Anya watched him, her initial dismissal of another forgery attempt slowly giving way to a profound, almost reverent fascination. He wasn't painting, he was unpainting. His movements were precise, deliberate, almost surgical, yet imbued with an astonishing delicacy. He wasn't just removing paint, he was coaxing light from darkness, revealing a truth. As she watched, the subtle nuances of technique began to reveal themselves beneath Silas's expert hands. The living light that Silas had privately obsessed over, the inimitable quality of van der Velde, began to pulsate from the canvas, undeniable, breathtaking. Anya felt a jolt of recognition, a shiver running down her spine. The brushstrokes, the unique luminosity. She knew them. It was the lost, the veiled muse. But how and why was Silas, the infamous forger, restoring it instead of replicating it? She realized with a shocking clarity that Silas wasn't forging. He was revealing the true masterpiece. This was Anya's unveiling. She witnessed his true genius, his profound, almost spiritual connection to genuine art, the mastery of a restorer, not just a replicator. Her breath hitched. She had to be careful. The gallery, and by extension, Isolde, clearly didn't know they had the original. Silas was in immense danger. She maintained her facade, observing for a few more minutes, then quietly excused herself, her mind racing. Madame Isolde, alerted by her informants about Anya's unusual interest in the restoration, particularly the duration of her visit and the intensity of her observations, grew increasingly agitated. She had planned to obtain a forgery from Silas, then sell it as the recovered original, bypassing the true owner and reaping immense profits. The thought that she might have inadvertently acquired the actual masterpiece, and that Anya might suspect, filled her with a cold fury. She immediately dispatched her most trusted enforcer, a man named Cale, known for his subtle but ruthless methods, to monitor Silas and Anya more closely, to ascertain the true nature of the painting. "Cale," she purred into the phone, her voice betraying none of her inner turmoil. "Ensure Blackwood's progress is satisfactory, and keep an eye on Ms. Sharma. Her curiosity is inconvenient. No overt actions, just observe. Report everything." She initially dismissed Anya's suspicions as mere professional curiosity, a keen art historian detecting something unusual. But her growing unease, reflected in her increasingly frequent and demanding calls for updates from Cale, indicated her escalating fear of exposure. Her actions now confirmed her as the malicious, scheming antagonist, actively working to control the narrative, suppress the truth, and eliminate any threat to her illicit empire. The true nature of the painting was now known to both Silas and Anya, a dangerous secret that placed them both in mortal peril, directly against the formidable power of Madame Isolde. The game had begun, and the stakes were nothing less than their lives, and the fate of an irreplaceable work of art. Silas Blackwood worked in a feverish trance. The restoration of the Veiled Muse was nearing completion, its breathtaking authenticity shimmering under the harsh glare of his studio lights. The ethereal glow, the shifting nuances of light that had once defied his every attempt at replication, now emanated from the canvas with an almost divine luminescence. It was more beautiful, more alive than he had ever imagined. Yet, this triumph was shadowed by a creeping dread. News had leaked, almost certainly orchestrated by Madame Isolde to flush out any competitors or confirm the painting's existence. That a legendary lost Van der Velde was rumored to have resurfaced. The art world, already a volatile ecosystem of whispers and grand pronouncements, erupted in a frenzy. Auction houses prepared bids, collectors scrambled for information, and the media descended like vultures. Madame Isolde, fueled by her greed and now convinced that Silas had stumbled upon the true original, sent a chillingly precise message to his encrypted tablet, a video call. Her face, usually so composed, held a dangerous glint in her eyes. "Silas," she purred, her voice deceptively soft. "My sources tell me the restoration of that charming little landscape is quite advanced. Indeed, remarkably so. I wish to inspect your progress. Personally, you will present the restored original to me for an authentication inspection at my penthouse within 24 hours. Failure to comply will be met with immediate, lethal consequences. Do not consider attempting to hide it. I know you have it, and I know what you are doing. This is not a negotiation. Silas, this is a trap. I intend to seize the painting and eliminate you." The video call ended, leaving Silas staring at his own pale reflection in the black screen. The cold, hard truth slammed into him, she knew. The deadline was a death sentence, a meticulously planned execution. Overwhelmed by a potent cocktail of fear, desperation, and a burgeoning sense of responsibility for the masterpiece, Silas knew he needed a moment of clarity. He felt a desperate urge to connect with something untainted by the murky world he inhabited. He drove, almost instinctively, back to the sprawling flea market, seeking out Agnes Finch's cluttered stall. The market was a chaotic balm, a world away from the sterile ruthlessness of Isolde's empire. Agnes was there, her gentle eyes twinkling behind her antique spectacles. Silas, feigning a need for obscure art supplies, tried to explain his predicament, careful to omit the most incriminating details of his past. He spoke in vague terms of a stolen original, a dangerous party, and an impossible deadline. He hinted at the painting's true identity, testing the waters. Agnes listened patiently, her gnarled hands smoothing a piece of antique lace. When he finished, she simply looked at him, her gaze surprisingly penetrating. "Some art," she began, her voice soft but clear. "It holds a spirit. The artist's spirit. You see, if you try to cage it, to own it for money, it fades. But if you protect its truth, its heart, then it shines. You, young man, have an artist's hands, but you need to see with the heart, not just the eyes. True value. It's never about the price tag. Is it?" She spoke of the spiritual connection between artist and art, of integrity and inner truth, emphasizing that genuine value lay far beyond mere monetary worth. Silas listened, his mind racing. He dismissed her words as naive, sentimental ramblings. "Agnes," he said, his voice tinged with impatience, "you don't understand the danger. This isn't about spirit, it's about survival. Madame Isolde doesn't care about the heart of the art. She cares about its market value, and she'll kill to get it." He remained pragmatic, trapped by his ingrained survival instincts, unable to fully embrace a moral path beyond the brutal realities of his world. He believed Agnes, with her humble life, simply couldn't comprehend the true, lethal nature of the situation. He felt a profound sense of loneliness in that moment, even with Agnes's gentle presence. He was truly isolated. Going to the authorities was out of the question. His past as a forger would incriminate him instantly. He couldn't trust any of his former syndicate contacts. They were Isolde's eyes and ears, even Anya Sharma. Despite her newfound respect for his restoration abilities, was still wary of his past and bound by her own professional ethics. She had confirmed the painting's authenticity for him, offering invaluable advice on its preservation, but she hesitated to fully join him in defiance of Madame Isolde, fearing the repercussions for her own career and life. Silas felt the immense psychological burden of being the sole protector of this irreplaceable masterpiece, with his own life and the very legacy of a true artist, hanging precariously in the balance. The arena for his ultimate test was now his isolated studio, a place that embodied his solitary, secretive life. He meticulously secured the heavy steel door, drawing the thick, light-blocking curtains. The only sounds were the hum of the air purifier and the frantic beating of his own heart. He was a fortress under siege, the only defense for the glowing canvas on the easel. As the hours bled away, the chilling reality of his predicament solidified. Madame Isolde's enforcers were closing in. A chilling, anonymous phone call, the voice distorted and menacing, confirmed they knew his precise location and the rapidly dwindling deadline. "The deadline approaches. Blackwood. Don't disappoint Madame Isolde. She dislikes delays and loose ends." Silas had mere hours left to decide. He had two choices: surrender the original to Isolde, complete with a forged authentication that would allow her to sell it as a recovered original, and frame him as the discoverer who would then conveniently disappear, or protect the masterpiece, somehow expose Isolde, and face certain agonizing death at her hands. He had to make a choice that would either condemn him further, binding him irrevocably to the criminal underworld, or lead to his ultimate redemption. A chance to finally use his unparalleled talent for good, even if it meant sacrificing everything. The clock on his wall, a small, unassuming digital display, glowed with an increasingly ominous intensity. Each ticking second was a hammer blow, counting down not just on his life, but on the fate of the masterpiece and the very integrity of the art world itself. He ran a trembling hand over the veiled muse, its light a beacon in his despair. He had to choose, and the choice, he knew, would define him. The digital clock on Silas's easel flickered, a malevolent red glow counting down the final, agonizing minutes. Less than 10 minutes remained until Madame Isolde's deadline. The heavy, reinforced door of his studio shuddered, a low, metallic groan echoing through the tense silence. Isolde's enforcers were here. Silas's breath hitched, a knot of icy dread tightening in his chest. He looked at the veiled muse, now fully restored, its living light almost blinding in its luminous beauty, a testament to his painstaking work. It stood on the easel, a beacon of artistic truth in his besieged sanctuary. This was the definitive bated breath moment, the air thick with impending violence, the culmination of his desperate struggle. A deafening crash shattered the silence as the steel door splintered, ripped from its hinges. 3 burly figures, grim-faced and radiating cold menace, strode into the studio. Kyle, Isolde's lead enforcer, a man whose eyes held the chilling emptiness of a predator, scanned the room, his gaze locking onto the glowing canvas. Blackwood. Kyle's voice was a low growl, devoid of emotion. Madame Isolde is displeased with your tardiness. He gestured to the painting. The masterpiece, if you please. And then we can discuss your future. Silas stood frozen, his mind racing, 1,000 desperate scenarios flashing through his mind. He knew he couldn't simply surrender it. He could surrender his life, but not the integrity of this masterpiece, not the legacy of Van der Velde. He thought of Agnes Finch, her gentle words about seeing with the heart, about the true spirit of art. He thought of the young artist in the park, the raw vulnerability of her genuine creation. He thought of his own past, the endless hollow perfection of his forgeries. This painting, this true original, was his one chance at genuine artistry, at real redemption. The shame of his past, the haunting emptiness of his life as a forger, solidified into a fierce, protective resolve. Just as Cale took another step towards the easel, his hand reaching for the priceless canvas, Silas, in a desperate, almost instinctive move, lunged for a nearby bucket. It was filled with a meticulously mixed, diluted pigment, a dark, rich umber he'd been preparing for a base coat. With a swift, fluid motion, a painter's instinctive gesture, he splashed the dark liquid across the luminous face of the veiled muse. A collective gasp of horror erupted from the enforcers. Cale froze, his eyes wide with disbelief, then contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. You fool, he roared, drawing a silenced pistol. You've destroyed it. It seemed Silas had failed spectacularly, destroying the very thing he was protecting, sealing his own doom. The vibrant living light of the painting was now obscured by a sickening smear of dark brown, a grotesque defilement. But Silas, his heart pounding in his ears, was already moving. He grabbed a handful of clean rags, soaked them in a specific volatile solvent he kept hidden, and began to quickly, precisely, wipe away the wet pigment. He wasn't destroying it. He was revealing a hidden layer. The original artist, Hendrik van der Velde, obsessed with protecting his masterpiece from theft and forgery, had famously devised a legendary, almost mythical anti-forgery measure. He had painted a subtle, almost invisible, secondary image beneath the main portrait, visible only when a specific chemical or, as Silas had realized in his desperate moments, a particular pigment mixture and quick wipe reacted with the layers of varnish and paint. This secondary image, known only to a select few scholars as the echo mark, was a unique, irrefutable signature, a hidden mark of authenticity that no forger, not even Silas himself, could ever have replicated without knowing its existence. It was a master's secret, a hidden truth embedded within the art itself. As Silas feverishly wiped, the dark pigment reacted with the painting's hidden layers, dissolving the thin, almost imperceptible coating that obscured the echo mark. Beneath the original veiled muse, a ghostly, skeletal hand began to emerge, reaching outwards, its fingers forming a cryptic, ancient symbol of protection. The luminescence intensified, piercing through the dissolving umber, illuminating the symbol with an unearthly glow. Silas, in his despair, had remembered Agnes's cryptic words about seeing with the heart and the artist's spirit. He had realized that the true way to protect the painting was not to hide it or to perfectly replicate it, but to reveal its uncopyable truth, to expose the master's cunning defense. This was his desperate, brilliant leap of faith, transforming his forger's cunning into an act of artistic genius, an act of true creation, just as the hidden signature was fully revealed, shining with an almost magical light. The studio door, now a gaping maw, filled with figures. Anya Sharma burst in, her face pale but determined, followed by a phalanx of uniformed police officers and a small, elite team of independent art authenticators. Anya had discreetly alerted the authorities, providing them with enough carefully worded information about a suspected illegal art transaction involving a lost masterpiece and an eminent forger, that they had launched an immediate raid. The independent art authentication team, led by Dr. Evelyn Reed, a renowned expert on Van der Velde, had been on standby, having been tipped off about the rumored lost Van der Velde. Dr. Reed, a woman whose entire career was dedicated to validating authenticity, gasped, her eyes widening in stunned disbelief as she saw the emerging echo mark. The echo mark, she whispered, her voice thick with awe. It's real. It's actually real. The enforcers, caught off guard, were stunned, their grim faces replaced by open-mouthed shock. They instinctively recoiled from the painting, unable to touch a now irrefutably authenticated masterpiece, its value now immeasurable. The police, led by a determined Detective Miller, whom Anya had convinced of the urgency, swarmed the studio, their weapons drawn, swiftly apprehending Cale and his men. The independent art world, alerted by Anya, descended upon the scene, capturing the incredible unveiling on camera. Flashes popped, reporters shouted questions, and the impossible truth of the veiled muse resurfacing. And Silas's breathtaking role in its revelation became a global sensation in an instant. Miles away, in her penthouse, Madame Isolde watched the live feed from her secure monitor, her usually composed face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. The veins stood out on her neck, and her perfect, manicured nails dug into the armrests of her chair. "No," she screamed, a raw, guttural sound that filled the opulent room. "Impossible. He's destroyed it. He's ruined everything." She saw Cale and her men being led away in handcuffs, the veiled muse being carefully protected by Dr. Reed, its living light beaming out from the screen. Her entire scheme, her vast criminal enterprise, built on a foundation of deceit and control, had collapsed. Her face, usually so serene, was now a portrait of utter impotent rage. In the studio, surrounded by the chaotic aftermath, Silas, though still reeling, felt a profound sense of vindication. The art world, from renowned experts to bewildered collectors, reacted with stunned disbelief, then overwhelming joy and admiration for the true genius of Van der Velde, and by extension, for Silas Blackwood, who had brought it to light. Anya Sharma, her face streaked with tears of relief, looked at Silas with an expression of profound admiration, seeing him not as a forger, but as a protector of art, a brilliant restorer, a man who had chosen truth over deception. The once cynical forger, who had once laughed at an old woman's seemingly amateur painting, had become the unlikely savior of a lost masterpiece, and in that act had found his own lost artistic soul, finally fulfilling the promise of his immense, genuine talent. The cheers of the onlookers, The flash of cameras, the stunned awe in the eyes of the experts. It was a public acknowledgement of his triumph, a profound recognition that went beyond mere technical skill, validating his very being. He had finally used his genius for something true. The seismic shockwaves from the recovery of the Veiled Muse resonated far beyond the confines of Silas Blackwood's studio, rattling the gilded cages of the global art market and sending ripples through even the most entrenched institutions. The image of the luminous masterpiece, restored and authenticated through a seemingly impossible revelation, dominated headlines. The story of the pragmatic forger and the hidden echo mark became a modern legend, forcing a profound, uncomfortable re-evaluation of how art was valued, protected, and understood. The old guard, those deeply entrenched in conventional art history and authentication, found their carefully constructed worldviews challenged, their pronouncements suddenly tinged with an air of outdated skepticism. The tide had definitively turned. Madame Isolde, watching her empire crumble from the confines of her penthouse, spiraled into a furious, calculated frenzy. Her vast criminal enterprise, a meticulously constructed edifice of illicit deals, stolen art, and calculated deceptions, was now exposed, its foundations cracked by Silas's unexpected act of truth. She attempted a desperate escape, activating contingency plans, preparing to vanish into her network of shell corporations and hidden safe houses across the globe. But Silas, now operating with a clarity and purpose he had never known, aided by Anya Sharma's meticulous ethical approach, had provided law enforcement with an unprecedented intimate understanding of Isolde's operations, working in a relentless, almost symbiotic rhythm. Silas and Anya pieced together the fragments of Isolde's empire. Silas, with his unparalleled knowledge of the syndicate's methods, its contacts, and its weak points, provided the crucial intel. Anya, with her sharp mind and unwavering ethical compass, translated this into actionable intelligence for international law enforcement. She meticulously cross-referenced financial transactions, traced encrypted communications, and identified key players within Isolde's vast web. Alara Vane's fragmented intuitive insights during the Eleanor Vance case, about greed and hidden vaults, now returned to Silas. Though he dismissed them as mere coincidences, they subtly guided his focus towards financial irregularities and concealed assets. He revealed Madame Isolde's vast network of offshore accounts, her use of untraceable digital currencies, and the ingenious methods she employed to launder billions through legitimate-seeming galleries and auctions. The combined efforts led to a series of coordinated raids across multiple continents. Isolde's lieutenants, caught off guard by the precision of the strikes, were systematically apprehended. Her vast network, accustomed to operating in the shadows, crumbled under the relentless pressure. Isolde herself, a woman who believed herself untouchable, was eventually cornered in a dramatic international sting operation in a secluded villa in the south of France, just hours before she could board a private jet. Stripped of all her power, wealth, and influence, her face a mask of bitter, impotent rage, she was apprehended and extradited. She faced multiple charges of grand larceny, fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder for her threats against Silas and Eleanor Vance. Her empire collapsed, and she received a lengthy, well-deserved life sentence, a fitting public downfall for a woman driven by such ruthless greed and contempt for genuine art. Her defeat was absolute, a powerful affirmation of justice in a world often swayed by illicit power. Silas Blackwood, the art forger who had once lived in the shadows, now stood at a precipice of profound professional transformation. Initially, he faced potential legal repercussions for his past forgeries. However, his instrumental cooperation in dismantling Madame Isolde's syndicate, combined with his undeniable role in recovering and authenticating the Veiled Muse, led to a plea bargain. He was granted immunity in exchange for his full testimony and continued assistance in ongoing investigations into the illicit art market. The art world, though still buzzing with the controversy of his past, hailed him as a paradoxical hero, A man whose unique blend of illicit skill and genuine artistry had saved a priceless masterpiece and exposed a global criminal enterprise. Against significant internal opposition from traditionalists who viewed his past as an unforgivable stain, the highly respected Louvre Museum made an unprecedented announcement. Recognizing the undeniable value of Silas's unique expertise, the Louvre, in collaboration with Interpol and UNESCO, established a groundbreaking new division, the Forensic Art Division. Its mission was to combat art forgery and illicit trafficking through innovative, interdisciplinary methods. And, in a move that shocked many, but resonated with a forward-thinking few, they appointed Silas Blackwood as its inaugural chief art authenticator and restoration specialist. This role was far more than just a job. It was a profound act of redemption, a meaningful outlet for his unparalleled genius. It allowed him to use his intimate knowledge of artistic techniques, his deep understanding of a forger's mind, and his meticulous attention to detail to identify fakes, expose criminal networks, and meticulously restore damaged masterpieces to their former glory. His new office, though still possessing the utilitarian efficiency he preferred, now overlooked the Grand Cour Carré of the Louvre, a symbol of his radical shift from the shadows to the very heart of the art world. He dedicated his life to preserving artistic integrity, a powerful public testament to his redemption. Months after the dust settled, with the Forensic Art Division fully operational and already boasting an impressive record of recovered artifacts and exposed scams, Silas sought out Agnes Finch. He returned to her humble stall at the sprawling flea market, no longer a desperate man seeking a canvas, but a man transformed, his steps lighter, his eyes holding a new, genuine warmth. He sat beside her, sharing a cup of her surprisingly good herbal tea, and confessed the full truth of his past as a forger, the illicit syndicate, and the impossible discovery of the veiled muse beneath her friend's painting. Agnes, her gnarled hands smoothing a piece of rough linen, listened patiently, her clear blue eyes holding no judgment, only quiet wisdom. When he finished, she simply smiled, a knowing twinkle in her eyes. "I told you, young man," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Some art whispers, and some hearts. They just need to listen. You found your true art, young man. Not in copying, but in revealing, in protecting its truth." She spoke of the inherent, almost spiritual connection between artist and art, and how Silas, by defending and protecting the original masterpiece, had finally found his own artistic soul. "That painting, the one my friend painted, that you scoffed at," Agnes continued, a gentle amusement in her voice. "It had a piece of her soul. And it woke yours, didn't it?" Silas nodded, a rare, genuine smile gracing his lips. He realized she was right. That humble, seemingly amateur painting at the flea market had contained the very soul of genuine artistic expression that he had lost in his pursuit of perfect replication. It had reawakened his dormant passion, his true purpose beyond the confines of criminal imitation. This conversation was not just a professional debriefing. It was a profound acknowledgement of Silas's personal growth, the dismantling of his deeply ingrained skepticism, and the beginning of a true, respectful partnership with a woman who had, unknowingly, set him on the path to redemption. The pragmatic forger and the humble keeper of forgotten truths, once separated by worlds, were now united by a shared understanding of art's profound intangible power. He finally found a profound sense of peace within himself, a quiet calm born from integrity and purpose. 3 years later, the scent of fresh oil paint mingled with the subtle aroma of blossoming jasmine, drifting in through the open windows of Silas Blackwood's studio. This wasn't the dimly lit, clandestine space of his past. This was a bright, expansive loft in Paris, sunlight streaming through towering skylights, illuminating easels crowded with vibrant canvases. These weren't copies. They were Silas's own original paintings, abstract pieces that pulsed with a luminous, almost spiritual energy, reflecting his journey, his understanding of light, shadow, and the profound human spirit. He painted for himself, for the sheer joy of creation, for the raw, authentic expression that had eluded him for so long. His life was no longer solitary. His days at the Louvre's forensic art division were demanding but deeply fulfilling. He worked seamlessly with Anya Sharma, who had become his trusted colleague and a close, dear friend. Their partnership was a testament to shared purpose, a blend of scientific rigor and intuitive understanding. Together, they had pioneered new methods for art authentication, integrating cutting-edge forensic science with Silas's unparalleled, almost instinctual grasp of artistic techniques and a forger's psychology. They were a formidable team, a blend of minds that had brought countless hidden truths to light. Silas often found quiet moments to escape the bustle of the Louvre, making discreet trips to a small, charming antique shop on the left bank. It wasn't Agnes Finch's cluttered flea market stall, but it held a similar spirit. And there, behind a counter piled with vintage postcards and forgotten curios, sat a woman whose eyes held the same quiet wisdom as Agnes's, a distant cousin who had inherited a similar gentle spirit. Silas regularly visited her, sharing stories and quiet moments, sometimes bringing her old canvases he had found at other markets, canvases that held secrets, waiting for the right touch to reveal their hidden beauty, much like his own journey. Agnes Finch herself, though now too frail to travel, received frequent, heartfelt letters from Silas, filled with updates on his work, his art, and his newfound peace. Driven by his own profound journey of redemption and a fierce belief in the power of authentic creation, Silas had established the Silas Blackwood Foundation for Authentic Art and Artistic Integrity. The foundation was his way of paying it forward, a beacon of hope in a world often overshadowed by greed. It actively funded educational programs that taught aspiring artists the true value of originality, the ethical responsibilities of art preservation, and the insidious dangers of the black market. It provided generous scholarships and invaluable mentorships for young, struggling artists, particularly those from humble backgrounds, ensuring that genuine talent, regardless of circumstance, was nurtured, protected, and celebrated. He frequently gave lectures at art schools and universities, sharing his story with an earnest humility. He never explicitly detailed the illicit aspects of his past, but his narrative of immense talent misdirected, of finding one's true path through unexpected revelations, resonated deeply, inspiring countless individuals to find their own authentic voice and purpose. The sun began to dip below the Parisian rooftops, casting long, golden shadows across Silas's studio. He stood before a large, vibrant canvas, a piece of his own creation that commanded the center of the room. It was an abstract, a riot of color and light, filled with shifting layers that seemed to breathe, almost as if imbued with the living light that had once defined van der Velde. Yet it was distinctly, undeniably his own. He looked at it, a quiet, contented smile on his face, the weariness of his past replaced by a profound, inner peace. His gaze then drifted to a small, framed, slightly faded photograph on his easel, tucked carefully beside his brushes. It was a picture of Agnes Finch, her silver hair pulled back in a loose bun, her eyes twinkling with that familiar, knowing wisdom. She held one of her own amateur landscape paintings, a simple, vibrant scene of a rolling green hill. He remembered his initial scoff, his arrogant dismissal of its crude brushstrokes. He remembered the profound irony of it containing the very lost masterpiece that had saved him. Now, he recognized the deeper truth. The true masterpiece was never about the price tag or the signature, not about the grand museums or the hushed auction houses. It was about the soul poured onto the canvas, the genuine human spirit expressed through color and form. However humble, the forger, who had once laughed at an old woman's painting, had found his true art, not in imitation, but in creation, in redemption, and in the quiet, undeniable beauty of authentic human connection. He had finally painted his own masterpiece, a life lived with integrity and purpose. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness. Please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming stories.